the Israeli strikes in Syria, did they inform you ahead of time of these?
I don't have any conversations to read out. We need to speak more with them about this before we have anything to say about it.
Would you have expected them to? I mean, in scale, these are very significant. Some have made comparisons to the sort of wiping out of the Egyptian Air Force in 1967.
Again, I just don't have anything further to say. We need to have further conversations about them before we comment in detail on the matter.
Can I follow up on the status of the Golan Heights? I'm slightly puzzled with what you just said, because you've said, the Trump administration, which recognised control of the Golan, because you said last year on this that as a practical matter, the Golan is important to Israel's security. And these were your words then: as long as Assad is in power in Syria, and as long as Iran is present in Syria, there's a significant threat to Israel. And control of the Golan remains of real importance to Israel's security. So has that changed?
So obviously the factual situation has changed, but you do have a situation now where you have a period of instability in Syria. You don't have effective control by a government that we know is committed to peaceful relations with its neighbors. So not the same security threats exist. Obviously, you don't have the Assad regime there, and you have seen Iran's influence inside Syria weaken quite considerably. But there still is a security threat. That is a practical matter, which is what I was saying has not changed.
But this isn't. What's the legal determination of the State Department? Do you recognise as a legal matter Israel's control over the Golan?
So that is a decision that was made by the previous administration to recognize the Golan Heights as part of Israel, and there has not been a carry-on legal determination made, or I say contradictory legal determination has been made in the year since.
With regards to the disengagement zone, I know there's some confusion about whether or not the Israelis have gone even beyond the buffer zone, the disengagement zone, further into Syria. But I mean, there's a chorus of disapproval of this. I mean, the UNDOF, the Secretary General's spokesman, has told them to stop. UNDOF informed them ahead of time it would be a violation of the 1974 agreement. You now have Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, all critical allies for you in terms of getting on board the vision that you trying to lay out for the future of Syria, who have all said this is an attack on Syria's sovereignty, a dangerous development. I mean, what's your position on Israel having invaded that buffer zone?
So I spoke to this yesterday. Nothing has changed since then. What precipitated their move into the buffer zone was the withdrawal of the Syrian armed forces, which, as I said yesterday, creates potentially a vacuum that could be filled by any one of the numerous terrorist organizations that continue to operate inside Syria that have sworn to the destruction of the state of Israel. Israel has said that they deployed their forces into the buffer zone temporarily to prevent such a threat from emerging against the state of Israel and against Israeli civilians. Ultimately, we want to see the 1974 agreement upheld.
I mean, do you not worry this just further erodes the importance and value of international law?
I think it's important that the step that they have taken has remained temporary.
Okay, and I mean, on those the Golan Heights, the occupied Golan Heights, is absolutely littered with the remnants of Syrian villages, of homes from 1967 and demolitions that took place. I mean, many thousands of people were expelled or forced to flee. Many of those people will be looking at, what's going on now. You talk about a Syrian process, a Syrian-led future for the people of Syria. I mean, those people had homes and villages back in the occupied Golan Heights. What should they be thinking now? What's the US saying to them?
So I think, Tom, with any number of questions about where things might go in the future, we need to step back and realize that we are 2.5 days since the fall of the regime. And before we start making grand pronouncements about how things are going to proceed in the future, it's important to remember that we are in early days. We are just beginning to have conversations with partners in the region about the path forward and trying to get partners to align around principles that we think are important. And we have not yet seen the Syrian people have the ability to make their voices heard. So before we start to get into too far down the road, I think it's important to let the process play out a little bit further.
I just say that, I mean, you talk about pronouncements, but they will say you've already made a pronouncement about the occupied Golan Heights because you've said you recognise Israel's presence there.
It's an action that was taken by the government of the United States years ago with respect to anything over the last few days. I think it's important to let the dust settle a little bit.
Just on the OPCW meeting that you mentioned, that's going to be on Thursday.
Yeah.
This may not be a question for you, but does the United States believe that Syria remains a member in good standing of the OPCW? And whether it does or not, will they be represented there?
So
And
it really,
if so, by whom?
that really is a question for the OPCW. It's hard for me to imagine that a country that has used chemical weapons on its own country remains a member in good standing, whether there's some technical membership or not.
Well,
I don't have
they joined in 2013 after the deal that was brokered between John Kerry and Lavrov.
My point remains, whether they were formally expelled from that, I do not
No,
know.
I mean,
It's a question
they
for
are
the
still,
OPCW.
but do you think that they should be represented? Or that they should have a representative?
I'd have to take that back. And so we're at the position where you're in a transition. I don't know who the representative would even be. I'd have to take that back and consult with others.
So you wouldn't have a problem if the OPCW...
That's not at all what I said. I said I said I need to take it back and consult with
Okay.
others. You're right. I'm sorry. I apologize for interrupting your question.
I just want to know if you're okay with the OPCW having a meeting, an emergency meeting about the chemical weapons in Syria, at which Syria is not represented.
I need to take that back and consult with our experts on the OPCW here, of which I am not one. Yeah.